Glad you could join us. Boy, you got baseball, politics, Reagan, Roosevelt. We got a lot to jump into. You piqued my interest last week. As a long-suffering Cincinnati Reds fan here, I can relate to your struggles in Baltimore, Matt. Although you're in the wild card race, I just want to point that out. So how did you come to baseball and politics, and what's the connection here?
Well, I'm always, when you cover politics every day for years, you find you start to see politics in everything. But I am a big, longtime Baltimore Orioles fan, which has been, they won the World Series when I was 9 years old, and I thought we were going to win every year, and we haven't been back. So they sucked me into a lifetime of fandom, and it's been a lot of disappointment, including last night against the Yankees, I should add. But look, I really took another gut punch the other week when the trade deadline happened and Adley Rutschman was dealt to the Boston Red Sox, the hated rival, same division, same league, rival Boston Red Sox. And, I started looking around, and it turns out it's not just small market teams like Baltimore who are losing their players, but what happens during these trade deadlines is that the rich teams, the Los Angeles Dodgers, the Boston Red Sox, the New York Yankees, those teams tend to do really well. And the Dodgers, in fact, picked up a two-time Cy Young Award winner during the trade deadline, which I'm sure will help them come the playoffs and probably another World Series victory. So I started asking myself, is this fair? Is this good for baseball? Because I do think there's a lot of parity in baseball in the sense that everybody can kind of think their team might make the playoffs. I mean, heck, the Orioles are under 500 and they're in possession of a wild card spot the last time I looked. So the problem isn't getting into the playoffs. The problem is that like the Dodgers keep winning every World Series. And I do think for baseball to be healthy, there has to be a belief that next year your team, you could at least dream that you could make it. And I do see a parallel there with the American dream. I think for America to work to fend off socialism, for example, it's very important that every poor person in America, and certainly every little kid, can believe he can grow up to be president and that he could be rich someday. And for many years, we had that dream. Even if you were poor, you could have that big, nice house, just like the rich guy in your neighborhood. And I think it's getting harder to maintain that dream, and that's a problem.
Matt, is it a question of a subjective nature? You talk about rich. Well, I mean, we have more millionaires than we've ever had in America at any given time. We've had more billionaires than we've ever had. Is it a matter of understanding what rich is to one person versus another versus just the envy of I'm going to hate the billionaire class or the oligarch class, as is often said here on our text chat? How do we distinguish between what it really is to make it?
Well, I think there's a few things at play there. One, I think obviously there's inflation. So even though there's more millionaires than there used to be, how far does your dollar go? You have to make a lot more money to just keep pace. Then I do think some of it is subject to we it's just human nature that we don't judge ourselves by how good, how were we 10 years ago, or how are we doing compared to other people? Every American has at least one TV. Almost every American can afford air conditioning. These are luxuries that the richest people once upon a time didn't have or you couldn't even buy because some of these innovations maybe didn't even exist, right? And so there's we compare ourselves to others. And I do think social media, like things like Instagram, have made it harder because we're always comparing ourselves to people who have more than we do. And there is a bit of envy, and that's obviously like a sin. I do think, however, that things like home ownership. Now, look, our houses are bigger than they used to be. So again, it gets a little bit messy, a little bit fuzzy. But in general, I do think that there used to be a sense that your kids would do better than you would. And I think that's gone. And now things like AI are giving us even more sort of problems because, what will that do? Not only could it take our jobs, but when our jobs go, then so does a bit of our humanity, a bit of our purpose and meaning in life. And so we are in a place right now where I don't think we can just dismiss this as sort of spoiled, envious people. That I do think there is something serious and problematic here having to do with the American dream.
And the result, and we were just talking to Hoppy Kercheval kind of about this same subject, Matt. If you're 22 years old, 23, 24, you've got a college degree in hand, and you look at the landscape and go, yeah, but I've got $100,000 in debt from college. You know, a 3-bedroom house is $500,000. If I can even find a job, you look around and go, this isn't working for me. Where do you turn? Well, maybe you do look at the idea of socialism, democratic socialism, whatever you want to call it, and go, well, maybe that will work because this isn't working for me at this point.
Totally. Look, we can talk all day long about how blessed we are, and we are very blessed. And we have a lot of privileges in this country, both in terms of freedom and prosperity. But that person you just described, there are a lot of those people out there, an increasing number of them. And you can tell them all you want about how great the air conditioning is, or the TV. But if they can't find a job, they're not going to be able to probably get a girlfriend either. They're not going to probably be able to get married. The idea of owning a home doesn't exist. And for that person, and once that happens, we now enter into a danger zone, right? That's somebody who doesn't have a lot to live for, who doesn't have a lot to lose, who's not really invested in the system. And I think capitalism and liberal democracy requires people to, if you own a home, if you have kids, well, now you're part of the community. Now you care about your community because you've got skin in the game, so to speak. You don't, if you're sort of just this, individual out there floating around, not necessarily tied to your community, not married, not invested, doesn't own property. Those things can lead to some negative externalities. And ultimately, you could really give up on the American dream and say, well, this system no longer serves my needs. It has failed us. Let's try something more radical. And I do think that is partly responsible for the rise of democratic socialism, which is very clearly becoming more popular in certain segments of the population.
A few years back, Matt, still in the private sector, I had a real wake-up call in that I did not understand what motivated young people of the day. I'm talking about recent college graduates. We were paying more. We were offering more vacation. We were offering a higher standard of benefit than our competitor, yet we were losing talent to our competitor. You know what it turned out to be? They had an outdoor basketball court, and the kids were going there. They played basketball at lunch and I'm like, I still have trouble getting that through my mind. But it taught me one heck of a lesson. I don't know that today we understand what the American dream is for many of these youngsters. I think they clearly value time more than they value money. I think many of them are willing to forego the McMansion for the nice cottage or the nice house or whatever it may be, because that's their version of the American dream, having more leisure time, having more free time with family. I know a lot of people, younger talent, that said, I don't want to work 40 hours a week. I'm looking to work 30 or I'm looking to work 25 and I'll live that life according. So I wonder to what extent, if any at all, our inability as older generations, especially the baby boomers now, to not understand what is motivating the youth of this country somehow has led to their belief that a socialistic economic system would allow what they value as compared to just money and what you make. If they believe, and I think incorrectly, but if they believe that economic system would prioritize what they value over what the older generations that are kind of running the show value today.
Yeah, look, I think it's important to consider different people have different values and priorities. And I can tell you personally, I'm not young anymore, but I have, I work from my home and I get to take my kids to soccer practice in school. Mm-hmm. And I could probably be a more prominent writer, public, opinion leader, whatever, if I lived in DC still and worked at an office every day and traveled more. But I've made spending time with my family and having a more balanced life a priority, and I'm happy with it. And so I'm not, someone may say that's irrational, like if you're just after the profit motive. I also think there are things that really matter a lot, like experiences, community. I mean, playing basketball isn't just about playing basketball.
No.
It's partly about exercise and fresh air, maybe, but it's really about friendship and community. Things that
Connection.
people
Yeah.
really, these are deep-seated human needs that we don't get enough of anymore. And so I do think smart business leaders would be smart to keep that in mind when it comes to attracting talent. But look, I am a conservative-leaning, patriotic American, and I think that socialism is a bad thing that actually can stifle human flourishing. I know that. You guys probably know that. Some of these young people don't know that. And part of the reason is that it's been so long. We've gone so long since, the worst examples and the gulags in the Soviet Union. And I don't want to conflate social democrats like with, Stalin or something like that, but there is a slippery slope, and certain ideologies eventually will take you down certain roads and skew have sort of certain proclivities. So I am against this trend of democratic socialism, and certainly against socialism, and certainly against communism. But I get why some young people today are intrigued by it.
Matt Lewis is joining us. He's author of Filthy Rich Politicians, Too Dumb to Fail, host of the podcast that Matt Lewis Can't Lose. Let's see if we can connect the dots to your piece this week that Republicans maybe need to take a look at Teddy Roosevelt as a hero. And, Ronald Reagan is so 1984. Why Roosevelt? Why should Republicans take a look at him if they're going to maybe stymie some of this tide?
Well, my theory is that, great presidents usually come along during times of crisis or times of dramatic upheaval, technological, cultural, social upheaval. And they emerge and they rise to the occasion. And so Ronald Reagan comes along in 1980. And yeah, there were some comparisons to today. Iran was an issue in 1980. So was inflation. But generally speaking, the problems that plagued us in 1980 were very different. So we think about the malaise of the 1970s, the problems that Reagan confronted, very different, I would say, than what we're facing today. So I started thinking, what are our problems today? And to me, I think one of the big problems is what we've been talking about, this sense that these sort of broligarchs, these tech billionaires, the people like Elon Musk have emerged with their AI and their flock cameras and their data centers and their algorithms and their social media platforms spreading propaganda or conversely censoring our free speech. And I didn't sign up for this. I didn't invite this into my life, but this has dramatically changed. We talk about whether it's surveillance, whether it's the free market, the free market of ideas. There's so many components where now I think you could argue these big tech broligarchs really are more important to our lives than the state. They have more control or more potential to disrupt and control our lives than even big government does. And so I start thinking, like, historically, if we're looking for a model, someone who's taken on something like this, who would it be? And I think it's Theodore Roosevelt. I think it goes back to coming out of the Gilded Age, where you had all of this income inequality, all these like rich businesses and monopolies, and this traitor to his class, this Rough Rider, comes into the arena, and what does he do? He takes on food. Reading the Upton Sinclair's book, The Jungle, and he takes on the cause of making sure our food and our drugs are healthy that we're using. He goes after these big business monopolies and the railroads, and he breaks them up, and he basically puts them in line. Now, Theodore Roosevelt's not a socialist. He rails against socialism. He's a capitalist. He's a Republican, but he's also progressive. And he's a rich guy who's willing to go after big business in a way that I think the current rich guy in office right now is not willing to do. And so that was sort of the premise of this piece. And I think so far it's gotten a pretty good reception.
Matt, we're going to have to leave it there, although we could probably do another hour and a half, maybe 2 hours on the subject. Hey, Matt Lewis, author of Filthy Rich Politicians, Too Dumb to Fail. He's also host of the Matt Lewis Can't Lose podcast. You can watch that on YouTube, co-host of the DMZ podcast as well. Matt, good to talk to you again. Appreciate it, buddy.
Thank you.